Lesson 4.7, Writing Equations from Graphs. Before we move on, let's just remember that when we're writing equations from graphs, we're always going to want to use slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b, right? Because we can see the slope and we can see the y-intercept when we are working from a graph. Let's also recall that slope, m, is rise over run, and when we talk about b, we're talking about the y-intercept. All right, let's go ahead and let's look at the first problem, example 1. All right, in example 1, our y-intercept, right, our b value is right here at -4. And what is my slope? Well, first thing we need to do is find another good point. Maybe, okay, right there looks pretty good. So how did I get from the first point to the second point? Well, let's remember that when we're talking about slope, we're talking about rise over run. So I had to rise 1, 2, 3, and I had to run 2. So 3 over 2, right? 3 over 2. So my slope is 3 over 2. So when I'm writing my equation, y equals mx plus b, the m goes in the front. So we got y equals 3 over 2x, and then plus b. But since mine is a -4, I'm just going to say -4. I don't need to say plus -4. I can just say -4. And there is my equation. That's it, right? It's not super complicated as long as you remember to always check, is this a positive slope? Yes, it is. Okay. Let's look at problem 2. Problem 2, first things first, I see my y-intercept is at -6. And then my slope, let's see, another good point looks like, that one looks almost like a good point, but not quite. Okay, I'm thinking this one looks the best. All right, so I'm going to go down 2. I'm going to go right 1, 2, 3, 4, right 5. So my rise over run is 2 over 5. But in this case, since I went down and right, and I'm creating this negative slope, I just need to remember to include a negative here. So -2 over 5 is my slope. So my equation here is -2 over 5x minus 6. -2 over 5x minus 6. All right, our last two problems are fairly confusing because they have our kind of our weird slopes. So before we try and write equations, let's go ahead and let's talk about the slope and the y-intercept for each. When I have a vertical line, my slope is undefined. If you remember Slope Dude falling off the cliff, right? He yells undefined, vertical slope. And my y-intercept is, I don't have one. Some kids say 0, but if that was the case, I would have a point right there, and I don't. That's not 0. So I'm just going to write none. So is my equation for this thing y equals undefined x plus none? No, that's stupid. Like, what is that? I don't know. Let's look at the next one. Let's look at the next one. All right, here I know my y-intercept is -4. I also recall from what I know about slope that if I have a horizontal slope, that my slope is 0. Well, that I can work with that, right? Those are numbers, so I can say 0x minus 4. But I really don't need to write 0x, so I'm going to say -4. So that is my equation for this graph. All right, so we're back to this weird one here. Here's what I need you guys to understand. If I have an undefined slope and no y-intercept, I can't say y equals, right? Because, like, what would I even put after the y equals? What do I write for undefined slope? Nothing. My equation for this, you ready for it? That crosses right there at 3. My equation right here is x equals 3. It's so weird, right? X equals 3. It's not y equals because my slope is undefined. Like, what would I even write for that? So here's your hint, right? For both of these, we're going to say it is an x equals equation or a y equals equation, depending on which axis is crossed. Okay, so if it crosses the x-axis, it's an x equals equation, right? And doesn't that make sense, right? Isn't this point right here not just 3, but isn't that point x equals 3? Isn't this point where it crosses here, isn't that point y equals -4? That's actually the equation for the line, right? Don't overcomplicate things. It's just the equation, x or y, depending on which axis is crossed.